own. A room of your own is a girl positive space. So I will show you the picture afterwards. We just don't know where it is. I created a logo for a girl positive space. So this means we celebrate, honor, and respect young women. As a young and vibrant woman, you can be who you are in the space created for you, and you'll be loved and commended for it. As a girl positive space, we celebrate diversity, equality, and inclusiveness. So thank you for joining us here today. And a Room of Your Own book club, book of choice is The Missing by Melanie Florence, who's right here. So Melanie, a warm welcome. So Melanie Florence is an award-winning writer of Cree and Scottish heritage based in Toronto. She was close to her grandfather as a child, a relationship that sparked her interest in writing about Aboriginal themes and characters. She is the author of Missing Nimama, which won the 2016 TD Canadian Children's Literature Award, the 2017 Forest of Reading Golden Oak Award, and was a finalist for the 2017 First Nation Communities Read Award. Okay, she's really accomplished. Her most recent picture book, Stolen Words, won the Ruth and Sylvia Schwartz Children's Book Award, is shortlisted for the Merrill Bailey Picture Book Award, and was okay. And was given a starred review by Kirkus, who is listed as one of the best picture books of 2017 to give readers strength. Her books include Righting Canada's Wrongs, The Residential Schools, and the teen novels He Who Dreams, The Missing, One Night, and Res Runaway. In her spare time, Melanie watches Doctor Who and Harry Potter with her daughter, discusses the DC versus Marvel universe. We'll do this later, okay? Universes with her son, and makes her husband sit through scary movies with her. She shares her home with her family, their 2 dogs, Henry and Daisy, 2 cats, Shadow and Oreo, and a backyard that seems to constantly attract wildlife like raccoons.
Oh, there's like, what's that thing that just falls over and plays dead? Raccoon. There's like, oh, there's some weird things in there.
So let's give a warm welcome to Melanie Florence.
Okay, hi. I don't want to stand behind a podium. I feel like a dork. You can hear me. I'm loud, right? Can you hear me? Yeah. And I can hear me? Okay. So I'm supposed to do a reading, and what do I read? So I was going to read the first chapter, and then I sat down and started reading it, and I swear a lot in this first chapter. I swear a lot in life, so that's not that surprising. So yeah, I mean, or I can do, you guys read it, right? Yeah. So I can do the first chapter and swear at you, and you'll know who I really am in life, because that's how I talk. Or I could read the chapter where she goes undercover. Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna put my glasses on. I don't want to get old and I my dogs ate my glasses. Okay, chapter 33. Going undercover. There was not one thing in my closet that didn't scream, I shop at the Gap. Most of my wardrobe consisted of t-shirts with superheroes on them. This is basically me. Jeans and yoga pants. Nothing I could imagine wearing to the riverfront on a hunt for whoever took me out. My eyes prickled with tears. And after this much time, I still refused to consider that I might never see my best friend again. If the police were going to throw my brother in jail when there was no way he had anything to do with Mia's disappearance, then I'd have to look for the guy myself. I felt anger rising up in me again like a wave of nausea I couldn't swallow. Why did at least 3 girls going missing from the same place not set off any alarms? I sighed, pushing clothes hangers across the rod, crashing them together and sending a pair of khaki capris to the floor. I bent down and retrieved them and stopped as my gaze fell on an unfamiliar backpack lying on the floor. I reached for it and then paused, realizing who it belonged to, me. I picked it up, trying to remember when Mia had put it there. I drew a blank. It was heavy in my hand, bulging at the seams. Mia had sketched and written all over it. I ran my hand over a realistic drawing of her dog, JJ, and smiled. My fingers stopped at a tiny red heart by the clasp. I squinted at it and then recognized a minuscule K written script. How could I not know? I shook my head and pushed the ever-present guilt down as I opened Mia's bag. I just realized if this is being filmed, can I not be heard if I'm not on the mic?
It's better if you are.
Is it okay if I just yell my face off over here? It's better. That was not weird at all. I'm sorry I pulled you out of that completely. Let's try to go back in. Clothes spill down onto the bedroom floor. Shirts, pants, a jacket, skirts, an entire wardrobe. It was as if she thought she might need to take off suddenly and stay away for a while. I sighed and started picking up the clothes. I was folding a silver miniskirt with black skulls printed on it when it occurred to me that if I was going to the riverfront to attract a killer, I needed a disguise. Mia's clothes were exactly what I needed to go undercover and not look so much like I was about to bust out some choreography from an old Navy commercial. I'm not going to do that. I will spare you. I laid her miniskirt on the bed and looked over the rest of Mia's clothes. I picked up a black tank top and placed it on the bed with the skirt. I had a sudden flash of inspiration that led me first to my dresser where I had a pair of fishnet stockings left over from Halloween, then towards the basement door. I flicked the switch as I started down the stairs. My mom had spent a lot of time fixing up the basement so she and Kiwa could watch the Jets and he could play his video games. I rarely went down there unless I had to find something in the storage room. Piled floor to ceiling with cardboard boxes and plastic bins, the storage room was tidy but unorganized. Boxes labeled kitchen were nestled on top of a bin, inexplicably marked boxes, and another with a tools label. I stood in the center of the room, hands on my hips, and looked around. Kiowa's lacrosse trophies was on top of Feather's sculptures from my ill-fated foray into art classes with Mia, and Feather's shoes and junk in my own handwriting. I pulled Kiowa's box of trophies down and stood on my toes to lift the plastic lid off my shoe bin. I fished around, pulling out my junior high cheerleading sweater, a social experiment engineered by Mia, and a stuffed elephant I had creatively named Ellie. I reached in further, spotting a flash of cherry red, and pulled out my old Doc Martens. I hadn't worn them in years, but they'd go great with my outfit. Mia's outfit, I amended. To find the guy who took my friend, I'd have to become Mia, at least for a little while. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at my reflection critically. I pulled at the hem of Mia's skirt, willing it to lengthen another couple of inches. I wasn't entirely convinced that my ass wasn't showing. I'm so sorry to the teachers here who maybe didn't read all the swear words that I used. Like, hang around me for like 20 minutes. Something's going to come out of my mouth. The tank top showed off cleavage made impressive with the help of a push-up bra. The red docs definitely made the outfit, though. I turned, twisting my head, trying in vain to tell if anyone really could see my ass. I didn't think so, as long as I didn't bend over. I turned back around and leaned in towards the mirror, running my fingertips under my eyes and smudging the coal black eyeliner I had found with the Halloween fishnets. That would have to do. This was as close to psychobait as I was going to get. The next step was less clear. I figured I'd hang out at the riverfront because that's where Mia, Carly, and Sarah all went missing. I had no idea if they met the guy down there or not. They could have caught his attention anywhere. I wasn't even sure what I'd do if I found him. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but I had to start somewhere. I sighed, wishing I could call Jake and get him to come with me for backup, but there was no way he would agree to putting me in danger. And truthfully, I wasn't sure I really wanted him there. Standing in my bedroom, surrounded by all my pictures of me and Mia, I felt completely alone. I hadn't been down to the river at night before. It was completely different when it was dark. During the day, the Riverwalk was populated with young moms with jogging strollers and tourists with cameras slung around their necks. Couples strolled hand in hand along the riverbank on romantic dates. It was a safe place to walk and get some nice views of the city during the day. But at night, the riverfront came alive with street kids, homeless people, people looking to score drugs, and sex workers looking for dates. I felt completely out of place until I remembered that I was in disguise. I walked past a group of kids about my own age, passing a joint back and forth. They nodded at me as I walked by, maybe thinking they knew me from some other night below the overpass. As I walked towards the bridge, I looked at each person I passed, hoping one would be Mia. Never was. But the sheer number of Aboriginal girls hanging out alone or just with one other girl was mind-boggling. Didn't they know how dangerous it was for them? Hadn't they read the statistics? I wanted to yell, "Get out of here! We're 4 times more likely to be killed than that white girl over there," but I didn't. I saw places where the streetlights didn't penetrate the darkness. I was afraid to look too closely after hearing some of the moaning sounds coming from the darkness. There were too many places where someone could hide, could watch, could reach out and grab. Far too many places where someone could drag a girl and make it sound like they were on a date. I was so deep in thought I didn't notice I'd walked away from the groups of people. Aside from the odd pedestrian hurrying past in the other direction, I was alone. The gloomy spots on the Riverwalk seemed even darker where there were no people and no voices. I jumped at a shadow and started moving faster, the overpass looming ahead of me. It was even darker there. The lights didn't reach very far. The space underneath was black velvet, cloaking everything. I could make out nothing but shadows. I stepped into the suffocating darkness. I heard a scraping sound to my right. I jumped and tried to see what it was, but what little light was there played tricks with my eyes and cast murky shapes on the walls. I thought I heard footsteps, but they could have come from anywhere. A sound like a sigh came from behind me. I held my breath and turned slowly. I thought I saw something move. Is someone there? I asked, willing my voice to sound steady. Hello? I waited, holding my breath, but there was no response. I let out a breath and turned again, walking with my arms held out in front of me. Shadows danced around me, and what could have been a rat skittered around my foot. I squealed and kicked, but missed it. I stopped again and heard someone draw a breath right behind me. I ran a few steps forward and turned, fists swinging, but touching only air. Who's there? I demanded, feeling considerably less brave than when I had walked in. I stood still, waiting. I tried to see around me, but I could only make out vague shapes. I wasn't even sure which way led out to the river walk. I was so disoriented. I was about to try to trace my steps back out when someone blew softly into my ear. I screamed and swung my arm with all my might, catching whoever it was, a man, from his grunt of pain in what I took to be his face. I ran, guessing wildly which way was out. He reached out and grabbed my arm, but I shook him loose, still screaming. I was back out on the river walk with a few more steps. I ran until I was standing under a streetlight, the voices of a group of kids talking about music filling my ears. Then I turned and looked behind me. A man was standing just at the edge of the darkness under the bridge, watching me. His features were hidden. I stared, breathing hard, backing away slowly towards the voices behind me. There was something vaguely familiar about him, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I turned and walked towards the sound, the light. I stopped a couple of feet away from the kids and turned back once more to see if he was still there. As I watched, he raised a hand and waved at me. Do you want me to talk or do you want me to say?
You can
The inspiration for the book, I mean, it's pretty self-evident. My first picture book was a book called Missing Ni Mama, which Tanya mentioned, and it was a picture book about missing and murdered Indigenous women, which sounds weird for a picture book, I understand, but nobody was talking about this issue. And I wanted to write it in a way that was accessible. It's not for little kids, obviously, but was accessible for children and for teens to read, because I felt like my characters feel that this was an issue that wasn't being addressed, that it was not being talked about, that it was not being recognized as what it really is. And if the adults aren't going to do something about it, I always figure, well, I think the kids will. So I wrote a picture book about missing and murdered Indigenous women. I wrote a book about a little girl who grows up without her mom, but her mom is still watching over her. And it's funny because Myrna and I were saying, you mentioned the spirit behind you, and we both acknowledged that, oh yeah, they're around all the time. And that's sort of the basis of the book that I wrote, that indeed the spirits are around us. And if mom can watch her little girl grow up, she's going to. So after I wrote, look at that. Missing Ni Mama, there you go. So after I wrote that, and it got a great response, I decided that I wanted to write a novel about it, and I wanted to make it accessible. So I had to try to make it entertaining and something that you'll want to keep reading, and not just a study of the issues. So I wrote a thriller that incorporated okay, so here's what you have to know about me and probably why I write for kids. I'm a lot better with kids than I am with grown-ups. Grown-ups just don't, no offense to the grown-ups that are here, I like kids a lot more. I think they're more effective at getting stuff done. And I think, thank God, our next generation, I think, is going to get a lot more done than we have accomplished. And so I believe that when you present information, they're going to be much more likely to act on it than the adults, right? And I wrote this book as a bunch of girls, one girl in particular, saying, hell no, we're not going to let this keep happening. If the cops aren't going to do something about it, if they're just going to take my brother, then I'm going to go down and find out who's doing it myself. And that's kind of how I see the girls of today, I guess. I have a daughter, and I will never write a female character who is weak. I will never write a female character who needs an adult to save the day. I will never write a female character who needs a guy to save the day, because I don't think that's who you are. I think that you are strong, amazing young women, and that's how I write my characters. So if you read a book by me, and I hope you got this out of it, the girls are strong. The girls save the day. The dudes do not, and the adults don't. And they realize what's happening, and they're the ones that do it. And that was my drive in writing this book, that we needed to have a girl step in and try to do something about this horrible issue that's happening. And initially, it did not take place in Winnipeg because I hadn't spent much time there, but it does now because my publisher asked, and I went to Winnipeg. And has anybody been to Winnipeg? It's an interesting thing walking around Winnipeg as an Indigenous person, an Indigenous woman particularly, because, and I'm a very pale Indigenous person, but it's interesting. It's a different dynamic than it is in Toronto, I find, and it was important that it be set there because it's where it began, it's where it's still happening, and yeah, so that's why I wrote it. Is that enough? So I'm such a dork, but yeah, so I guess that was the whole point of writing a strong girl who takes matters into her own hands and decides that enough is enough. We've lost enough women in our communities, and we want to do something about it. So.
Great. Okay, so
Okay.
and then we will take questions.
I can just yell. Wait, let's see. I love that you're bent over when you walk in. The camera can see you. You're not fooling anybody.
Test.
There we go. Okay.
So you can sit and we'll get questions from
Okay,
Doctor. Okay. So please let me know what you're dying to know from Melanie. So we're going to open up the floor so you can ask her anything you want to ask her about the book, the writing process, anything.
Don't ask me about my writing.
So earlier you mentioned about Harry Potter and stuff like that. What's your house?
Gryffindor.
Can't hear?
Excellent first question.
You can't hear? Okay.